What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the Gravity Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Chris. Thank you for choosing to tune in today. Hey, folks, we're back at it. How do you stay grounded in a world full of noise and chaos? What are your foundations? What are your core values, your faith, the relationships, your ethics? What are the things that when there's a complete storm going on around you, it allows you to be grounded, to take a breath, and to take things in? What are the things that allow you tomorrow to look back and go, yes, I operated with integrity. I didn't attack people at their core. I attacked issues. I don't know. What is it for you? Well, here on the podcast, Jaimie and I are aiming to bring on guests and talk about topics that create space for you to listen and answer the question for yourself. What are your foundations? You might agree or disagree with the guest. That's not the point. I'm not trying to bring on guests that you're always going to agree with. In fact, I hope that sometimes you listen and go, I don't agree with that. Even on one of my solo episodes, like you've heard the last couple weeks, you might listen to something I say and be like, yeah, Chris, you're wrong. I love it. Why am I wrong? What about your foundations keep you grounded to be able to say, yeah, I don't agree with that. That doesn't apply in my life. Today's guest, Ian Edwards, is a leadership instructor that I get the chance to teach with a couple times a year, and I love his mindset. Him and I don't agree on everything. In fact, there's some big foundational things that I think him and I are different on. And I think him and I complement each other really well when we teach together, because we agree on enough big things. And then the areas where we disagree, the contrast, I think allows us to catch more students. So I think you're really going to enjoy this episode here in just a second. But first, I want to talk about Deer Hollow Recovery Center. Deer Hollow was the place that I reached out to a little over a year ago, folks, when I was not doing well. I was in a really bad spot. I was scared. And I didn't know what the next step forward was. And Deer Hollow answered my call. They invited me to go to their recovery center. It was hard work. It was challenging. They pushed me. And then they stepped back and gave me space when I needed space. And then they stepped back in and pushed me. And I'd love to tell you, hey, folks, this is an easy answer. If you're struggling with anxiety, depression, maybe you have post-traumatic stress injury. All right, whether you're diagnosed or not, maybe you have that. I think Deer Hollow would be a great space for you. It's not going to be easy, though. So look down in the show notes, folks. There's both the phone number to call. There's their website. Check them out today. Maybe not for you, but maybe for someone in your family, one of your partners. With that, folks, let's get into this interview with Ian Edwards. Ian Edwards, welcome to the Gravity Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on here, Chris. Always great to catch up with a friend.
Yeah, I love our conversations, both just casual ones, and then when you and I are teaching leadership together, it's exciting. I haven't looked at the schedule to see when we're teaching again, but I'm hoping it's in the near future.
Yes, me too.
Hey, brother, for folks that haven't heard your voice before, can you give a brief introduction to the listeners?
Yeah, as you said, Ian Edwards, originally from Washington State, but tuning in now from San Antonio, Texas. We moved out here about 3 years ago with my wife and 4 kids, and I'm doing a full-time consulting, training and consulting gig now for the responder community. I usually refer to it as, the military, police, corrections, dispatch, anyone who is serving their community in some capacity that comes at a cost. I mean, that's where my true passion is. So launched Chisel and Stone is the name of my company, and just absolutely loving it. So do online training and in-person training, and just get out, see the real heroes that are out there doing the good stuff.
I love it. And what was your work history before you got into this independent consulting training stuff?
Yeah, so I started in corrections, Snohomish County, up in Washington State. There, Snohomish County. I was there for over a decade, and was left there as the training sergeant and FTO coordinator, and went out to work full time at the State Academy, CJTC, as one of the assistant commanders out there and overseeing all the corrections training. Had the opportunity through COVID, as a lot of people did, to recognize that wow, we can really work anywhere from anywhere.
Yeah.
This online capacity just blew the doors off of what we thought was stagnant. And for me, it was this moment of if I could live anywhere, where would I want to go? Probably close to some sunshine. As an Air Force vet, I always had fond memories of San Antonio, as I know you have.
Yes.
So San
Yeah.
Antonio is a great landing spot for us.
That's awesome. It's a great city. I was there when the Spurs back in we were stationed there from 99 to 2001. And and that's when the Spurs were hot, right?
Yeah.
David Robinson, Tim Duncan, and go Spurs go. That city came alive for their team. And then just all the culture that just blends together there from that Texas, we're Texas to the Latino culture and the food. And yeah, we really enjoyed living there. I didn't enjoy the cockroaches. I was literally in a conversation with a couple last night at our local gym's hot tub. Jaimie and I were, and we're talking about the flying cockroaches in San Antonio, Texas.
Oh yeah. The bugs out here are ridiculous, but we're a very bug friendly family. So, my 4-year-old comes in holding this giant cockroach and they're like, look, can I keep it? No,
Yeah.
let's go put it outside.
You know what? When that's the temperament, when your family engages the bug life like that, life is okay. It's when there's blood curdling screams
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh my gosh, someone lost an arm. And it's like,
Yes.
there's a bug. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, I don't like bugs either, but I know that's one of my jobs is as the XY contributor to this family is it's my job to kill all bugs. And
The
so
exterminate, essentially.
yeah, I like that actually. I'm the exterminator. That's gonna be something to do with my next tattoo. You just inspired something, Ian. Hey, brother, I know there's a lot of things you're passionate about just because of when you and I get to teach together. You mentioned in your intro some of the trainings that you offer to this first responder family within all of these different, service from dispatch to corrections to patrol to military to all those. What are some of those topics? What are some of the topics that you teach? Maybe, I mean, there's probably a lot. So what are the ones that I think you're most passionate about?
Yeah. I I spend most of my time in what is traditionally called the soft skills. And a lot of people don't like that term. I absolutely love it.
Hmm.
As I was in conversation with, Tim Fosnot, Arctac. He's a hard skills guy, and him and I do a lot of work together. And he said at one time to me, "Yeah, I'm just the hardware. I run the hardware side of things, and you run the software side of things. You can't run a piece of hardware, your phone, your computer, without software. It would be a."
Yeah.
And that for me was a light bulb moment of yeah, soft skills is just what's running all the hard skills behind the scenes, which you have to have access to. You have to
Yes.
be able to drive effectively and shoot effectively and get into physical altercations and access mastery in those moments of calling, those moments of trial. And without your software in place, we start making mistakes, we make missteps. And so some of the bigger topics, resiliency, emotional intelligence, communication, to name a few. I spend a lot of my time, as you know, in the leadership world, working with responder leaders, sergeants and above, typically in what leadership looks like. It's a huge passion of mine. But to answer what I'm most passionate about, some of the classes that I work around involve de-escalation.
Yeah.
Such a buzz term, I know, such a buzz term these days, but the de-escalation uh, class, the reason I am so passionate about that is because I see people change having gone through it.
Hmm.
So
Tell me more about that. What do you mean?
A lot of people have an idea of what de-escalation is, from the standpoint of, you show up and you talk a certain way and have a certain tone, and there are aspects to that. But at the end of the day, the way we approach it is, how do you create safety? How do you create a sense of psychological safety in the other person? That is,
Yeah.
and it looks different for everybody. And how do you create a sense of safety in yourself? And what I
Mm.
love about, I also run a train the trainer course where I put people in very uncomfortable positions that actually gets them closer to safety. Because a lot of times we use safety and comfort as synonymous,
Mm.
right? I'm comfortable, therefore I feel safe. No, it's actually just the opposite of that. If I'm going to have an open, vulnerable conversation with you, I have to have a sense of safety with you in order
Yes.
to open up, to tell you my secrets, to tell you about my family. I have to have a sense of safety with you to go into the discomfort. Most of the time when we stay in our comfort zone, it is because we don't feel safe.
You don't need it to be safe. You're
Yeah,
comfortable,
you're
right?
comfortable.
There's
Yeah,
nothing at risk here. My self-image, my employment, nothing's at risk here. So it doesn't matter whether it's safe or not. That's what I hear you saying. But when I have to step in those tough conversations, if I don't feel safe, then it just isn't happening.
absolutely.
Wow, I like that. Um, did you fall into this? Meaning, was it like, you're plugging along in corrections and all of a sudden you took a class or you started getting into leadership? Or do you think it was something that like was you were always passionate about, as you call them, these soft skills?
I think that the majority of my life I've been attracted to human behavior, and really peeling back the layers, I saw what was running human behavior, and it just jumped out at me of, when you look at some of the great names that are out there right now that are doing all this work on human performance, Stephen Kotler, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, that do all this work on how to access flow and optimal performance. How do I hack in to my physical machine? They will always say it has more to do with state than trait. It has more to do with your state of being than the training, the experience, the talent, all those things. That's why you could golf a great game one day and absolutely terrible the next. Maybe there's something going on with your software. So
Mm.
for me, it was just fascinating to look at the behind the scenes stuff that drives our human behavior, drives our performance and such.
This is really getting into psychology. Did you take psychology classes? Did you go to college? Did you take psychology classes? Did you like them? I don't know.
I did. I was drawn to psychology classes, but my primary field of study was philosophy.
Okay.
And it's funny that how those overlap. When you talk about flow sciences and you look through the history, the philosopher William James, he was one of the forefathers of what we call flow and flow science now. And Friedrich Nietzsche, same thing. He talked about, how do I level up my game as a human being, in
Yeah.
essence. Yeah.
My favorite psychology class was sophomore year of college. I'd gotten married August 1st. School started September 21st. My wife and I took human sexuality class together. Oh my gosh, that was an awesome class. I mean, we're talking about
Yeah.
sex for an hour, and granted, we are doing it in the academic realm. It's not like we're just being perverts in there. The professor, Professor Dillich, if I remember correctly, really good guy. Really enjoyed the way he impacted the class. Uh, there were times that I drove fast home with the wife. Anyhow, I can't. Hey, gentlemen, do not talk. Gentlemen, do not talk specifics. It's 26 years old. I think it passes some kind of statute of limitations for me to say what I've said so far. Hey, what
Yeah,
did you
just remember
see?
your producer is going to be going through this content.
She doesn't listen to every word. She just sits there and puts in the intro, the fun music, puts the, yeah, she's, yep. And you know what? We have a pretty open, what I've said so far, we have a pretty open house. It was funny last night. I just got my beard trimmed, and my beard was so long that you could not see any of my lips yesterday. My mustache was just totally down, which I kind of like because one of my great grandfathers, who I never met, but he, maybe even great great grandfather, he had a super long mustache to the point that my grandpa says he had to put a little coffee in the saucer or in the plate. He'd sit there and go like this just to get the tip of his mustache wet, and then he'd
Oh,
part it out. And for the folks that aren't watching on YouTube, they can't see exactly what I'm doing. Bottom line, he'd move the mustache out of the way. Well, yesterday I'm saying to my daughter about how now that I got this trim, I can kiss mom and actually, touch lip to lip. And she goes, "Oh my gosh, Dad, that's so disgusting." And I was like, can I remind you that you come in and give me kisses on the lips sometimes? She's like, "That's different." And I'm like, "Not the type of kiss I'm talking about." Just no. I digress. I digress. Hey, in the jail setting, I mean, we're talking about software, and I really like that analogy. I think that really connects when we talk about the hardware and the software and how they come together. I need to have the hard skills. I need to, in the first responder setting, if you're corrections or law enforcement, road law enforcement, you have to know how to handcuff people. Like that is a hard skill. There are steps to follow, there's ways to do it right, probably a bunch of ways to do it right. There's some ways to do it wrong, but then you also have to have the software. You have to have emotional intelligence. You have to connect with other humans. You have to make it safe. I'm about to handcuff you, but you know what? I'm going to treat you like a man or a woman, and I'm going to take care of you. What did you see in the jail setting when it came to software, whether it be inmates, corrections officers? In my mind, that's like this I'm trying to think of the right words for it, but I mean it's like this micro uh environment where you get to see things amplified compared to maybe out in the normal world, for lack of a better term.
yeah. And for anyone that is unfamiliar with often the way jails are run these days, we run direct supervision in a lot of cases. I worked at a direct supervision jail, meaning it is one CO, corrections officer, in there with a ratio of 79 inmates
Wow.
at a time. And they're not, locked down, they're not in their cells. You're in there managing them constantly. If you can't communicate, if you can't be aware of your environment, if you can't slow a situation down, that could be devastating in our world.
Yeah.
So I think that it really honed my skills, but I went out to work as a TAC officer, one of the primary instructors for the corrections officers academies, a little while into my career, and I started learning about these things at the academy as well. And the more I was teaching emotional intelligence and communication, I began applying more and more and just diving into the research, reading all the books that I could get my hands on those. And when I did a 4-year stint out there as an instructor, then went back into the correction setting, now with a different vantage point. And I said, let's see if this stuff works.
Yeah.
And that's when I saw the small things in, taking care of your state of being completely transform an environment and lead to successful outcomes where people walk away feeling like, oh, that could have went so much worse.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I Me teaching this, and I share this oftentimes. I don't know if I've shared it recently when you and I taught together, but I share it oftentimes while I'm teaching because I'm teaching emotional intelligence and communication. It causes me to constantly have to answer to myself. I have
Oh,
to
yeah.
look myself in the mirror and say, "Am I doing this right now?" And I have some high highs and some low lows. I can get jacked up, and I can think of times that I expertly de-escalated situations. I was emotionally intelligent. I engaged people as humans. I may even have to get involved in a use of force with a suspect, but then I de-escalate. I take care of them. I get them to jail, and they look at me and say, "Thank you." I'm like, "Thank you." I just sat there and had to use some pretty significant force on you for a little bit.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, "Yeah, but you treated me with respect."
Mhm.
But then I remember other times, one of the most vivid ones was towards the end of my stint when I was at the county fair, and I had a drunk cowboy. We had a drunk cowboy fight, and that caused private security to detain them, and they were gonna trespass them from the fairgrounds. But one of their friends was coming into our command post area, chipping, and I told him a few times, "You need to leave. This is a controlled area. You are not you are not legally able to be here. You need to step outside the fence line." And he would constantly encroach back in, back in, back in. And finally, the final time I was beelining it for him. And quite honestly, I had legal authority to arrest him at this point for obstructing us. And one of my subordinates saw me beelining it for him and pops out of the car and goes, "I got this one, Sarge." And I went, "What?" And he goes, "I got this one, Sarge." And I said, "Yes, sir." And I walked inside the command post and sat down and did some breath work as this detective walked over. And I don't know what he said to the guy. All I know is the guy stopped being a problem. He connected with him as a man and convinced him, "Give us time, give us space. We're going to process your buddies, or private security is going to process your buddies. And then y'all will be good for the night." And it worked. And I just sit there and see that in reference to, hey, I might be the right guy today.
Mm-hmm.
I might not be the right guy today. And just the having that awareness, or having friends or partners that have that awareness so they can tap us out.
Yep. Yeah, when it comes to running that software, and as you said, just being aware of it, it doesn't mean we're always doing the thing. It
Yeah.
just means, as you said, that it gives us a point of reference to look back and say, wow, I really showed up in a terrible way today. Or if I can stay in conscious control of what's happening to me in the moments that I need to show up.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we just run subconsciously.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Right? And so many things affect that. I get a terrible night's sleep. I skip breakfast. I'm cut off on the way to work. I go in, I have a terrible appraisal, with the boss or something like this, and I'm slip on something or trip over something going to my car at the end of the day, and I'm just frustrated and I'm hitting reds and it's just a terrible, my son runs up, Daddy, Daddy, I drew you a picture. Would you please just let me get through the door? Give me 5 minutes,
Yeah.
right? I'm already a trigger away from exploding on this little human being who I love with all my heart, and you contrast that with I get a great night's sleep. I have a breakfast in the morning that fuels my day. I start my day with a big glass of water, as you often do, right?
Yeah.
I'm hitting greens. I got Beach Boys playing on the radio, which always puts me in a good mood. Um, I'm got boss brings me a latte, into work or something like that. And then I get home after this amazing day, same stimulus. Daddy, Daddy, I drew you a picture. Oh my God, buddy, this is amazing. So, and so it's not ever the stimulus. It is what we have going on with our physical machine. And, I love this analogy. I think you and I have talked about this before. This is a Wayne Dyer thing, but he says, if you squeeze an orange, what comes out?
Think orange juice?
Orange juice. Yeah. Does spaghetti ever come out?
No.
Or apple juice? No. The squeeze is never the issue. The squeeze basically will only ever reveal what's inside. And I
Yes.
do find that oftentimes I'm faced with struggle as I see so many people I love right now faced with so much struggle. Um, and it's a revealing moment of what we have going on inside. And for me, um, it's hard to look in that mirror and say, what did I just produce? Was it orange juice? Was it anger? Was it resentment? Was it insults? Was I nasty? Or was I compassionate? Was I kind? Was I forgiving? Was I accepting? Right.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. There's so many things that you said. I really like that. It's not about the stimulus. It's about the squeeze. I didn't say that right. It's not about the stimulus and it's not the squeeze. It's those are just the revealing things that are coming up, showing what's going on inside. The analogy that has really resonated with me recently, and I'm using this in some of my training, is the check engine light analogy. Because when your check engine light comes on in your car, especially with, well, I would say with almost all cars,
Yeah.
you don't know what's wrong. A check engine light could be a number of different
Mhm.
problems, right? I mean, there's some unique lights like low tire pressure. You know what's wrong there. You don't know when the check engine light comes on, but the light comes on, it's grabbing your attention, and you either need to be able to diagnose it yourself. You either need to have one of those little computer units that you plug in, or you need to take it to your mechanic to do it. I mean, you need to do one of those things to figure out what the problem is. And so the core question I think that we have to ask ourselves is, what does your check engine light look like?
Mm.
Because blowing up at our kids, which I've done a number of times throughout my kids' childhood, that I don't want that to be the check engine light, right? Like the light was already on probably,
Right.
and that may make me realize, crud, this light's been on for the last 3,000 miles. This light's been on for the last month, but I want to rewind back. I want to get the red light, and I drop a couple cuss words, and then go, whoa, that's not my norm. I usually don't cuss over a red light. What's going on, Chris? Okay, bad sleep last night, and you didn't have time to grab breakfast this morning. All right, so right off the bat, I know I'm not showing up as my best because of sleep. I don't have food in me, so my body biologically is going to be responding to that. All right, so I need to take some actions because today is going to be a rough day, and it's okay for it to be rough as long as I can manage that until I have the chance to do the maintenance that I need to do. I don't know. Does that resonate with you at all? This check engine light idea?
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And the other reality, how I'm seeing it from the human performance realm is the more maintenance that you do on a regular basis, the more you avoid that light ever coming on in the first place. You know, if
Yeah.
you're regularly having good sleep hygiene, good nutrition, good emotional hygiene, all those things, you're likely not going to even get to a point where that thing comes on. But we are reactive by nature, I believe, and we usually have to be told with that big glaring light that I have not been taking care of myself before I start taking care of myself.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. That's a good segue. What are, I mean, I'm sure you and I have some overlap and then we have some differences. How do we do the routine maintenance? What does routine maintenance on our bodies and on our brains look like to you?
Great question. Well, physically, I would say the highest priority is sleep. I,
I put my arm up just because this is my big thing right now. Like I am seeing a big difference in me now that I have gotten serious about sleep.
yes, it is an absolute game changer, and sleep deprivation, which I think a lot of people wouldn't even classify what they're doing regularly as sleep deprivation, but it is leads to illness or ill-being in every other area, in your
Yes.
emotional world, your mental world, your physical world, your spiritual world. All of those other areas are affected by that one thing. So I think taking the time to get the sleep, to get caught up, and for a lot of the people that you and I know, it's not even a reality that they can do that thing. You know, our industries are set up in a way that almost prevents people from being able to have a good sleep life. But if they have the ability, here's what I would say is oftentimes when they get the opportunities to sleep, they won't because
Exactly. Yes. And
so
that's a big message right there because our jobs do require us to work hours and adjust shifts to the point that it makes it more challenging. And let's stop blaming the job.
yes.
The job is what it is. There are things that you have in your control. Case in point, I was talking to an officer, it's probably about a year ago, and he told me that he's gotten so serious about his sleep that when he's on night shift, they have a downstairs basement that's really cold and it's the spare bedroom, and that's where he sleeps. He doesn't sleep in his own bed.
Yep.
He sleeps in the basement because everything that we know about getting quality sleep, light control, making it as dark as possible, zero light if possible, having it cool, having as much sound barrier from him and the rest of the family, which he said in the basement it does that, right? It just, I didn't do those things. And then I also made excuses on my days off. Well, I want to spend some time with the kids. Hey, if you want to do that for a day, rock on, do it. But when that's your consistent habit, is I'm going to sacrifice sleep so that my kids can see me more. The way I showed up, there was a lot more yelling. There was a lot more impatience. And looking back on it, I wish I would have been trained and I wish I would have accepted. Hey, your family will get some of you. Go and get quality sleep first so that when you do show up, you show up as your best.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting when you start looking at the research into sleep too, the idea that those things that you mentioned, having 68-degree room, cooler temperature, eliminating caffeine for, a few hours prior to
Yes.
eliminating alcohol, they say 12 hours prior to sleep. So when you look at optimal performance coaches, they said if you are a drinker, you should be a morning drinker.
I heard Dr. Matthew Walker say that jokingly on the Huberman Lab podcast.
Yes.
He was like, "Hey, if you want to have alcohol, that's okay. Just do it with your breakfast."
And do it with breakfast.
And then they chuckled a little bit, but it's the reality. Hey, here's the deal. This is not to shame alcohol. I've given it up in my life. I don't want to go back. I don't think I'll ever go back to even casually drinking it because of what I've learned of what it does to my sleep.
Right.
Because I've learned that if I am going to have a drink, I have to acknowledge that tonight I am not going to get good sleep. And then for the next few days, I'm going to be behind. You don't really even catch up, they say. You can't, you don't gain it all the way back. Yes, you will eventually, with good sleep hygiene, feel better and show up better in all these areas that you've mentioned. But I've read that you don't catch up like you might in some other things in life.
No, you can't. They said a few days, just 3 days of, let's say, 4 hours of sleep a night. It would take you 2 weeks of 8 to 9 hours of sleep regularly just to get back to normal with your physiology. One of the other things that fascinated me with sleep was people say I can do fine on 3 to 5 hours of sleep a night, especially in our fields. But what they miss is our 8 hour sleep cycle is front loaded mostly with delta sleep, which repairs our physical machine, which is why after 4, maybe 5 hours, you can feel okay physically. And it's the back end of sleep that produces all the REM, the bigger cycles of
Yes.
REM, where we do all our cognitive
Oh yeah.
recovery, where memories are implanted, where we make those synaptic connections and learning. And when I see a lot of folks in our given industries struggle with their memory and struggle with learning and learning new skills or learning new things, I would directly correlate that to how
Yeah.
they're showing up and how much sleep they're getting. But just real quick plug with this. When we talk about, well, I have to wake up an hour before a shift, yeah, but do you? Is everything set? Did you take the time on your days off to get all of your outfits ready or to meal prep for the week so that you don't
Yes.
have to spend that extra 15 minutes? You can actually just sleep in, right?
Yeah. Well, I'll share this one from this morning. Right now, I'm training for a half marathon in October, and then I'm going to immediately flip over and start training for an Ironman 70.3.
Wow.
And I'm excited, so much so that I'm excited to work out. And my college coach is sending me these workouts. And so, but the problem comes when I go to bed at night. If I'm anticipating working out first thing in the morning, if I wake up at 3 or 4, I can't go back to bed. I'm like, I'm excited to get up and like, let's do this.
And it's
And
just you and Jocko at 4 o'clock in the
yeah,
morning.
well, I'm not a huge Jocko fan. He's a great guy, but really I'm more of a Huberman lad. I'm, Dr. Andrew Huberman. I'm much more into listening to him first thing in the morning. And I told myself last night as I went to bed, Chris, you are not allowed to work out in the morning. If you wake up at 4 a.m., you either go back to sleep or you're going to be reading a book or something. You're not working out. You're not going to work out until after that remarkable podcast with Ian Edwards. And I am not joking. I woke up at 4 a.m. I looked at my clock and I knocked back out. And I've seen this, I've been kind of observing my behavior, my sleep patterns for about the last 2 weeks, and it's been very consistent. If I go to bed with these kind of almost not anxiety, but this anticipation of something I'm going to do first thing in the morning, if I wake up at 3 or 4 to go pee, I can't go back to sleep. But if I go to bed at night thinking, no, Chris, you have nothing to do until 8:30, if I wake up, I can knock back out. It's fascinating, I think, the way our brain works and the way we can prepare ourselves. So that's what I used to do. Well, I need to wake up and work out. Yes, you do need to work out. That's an important part of your of maintaining your machine as well. And do you have to do it at 3 a.m.? Or is there other places in your day where you can get it done?
Yeah. And you you have a wearable device on just about every limb of your body. Are you
Just two of them. Again, for the YouTube listeners, you can see what I just did.
are you tracking your sleep and do you find anything that kind of throws off your sleep days?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So if you're into Dr. Matthew Walker, he wrote an amazing book, Why We Sleep. He gets into QQRT, the four elements that he says of great sleep, and I'm not going to get them all right here, but he talks about quality, meaning everything that you just described, Ian, going through those different stages of sleep. Quantity, 8 hours. In his book, he says that he has found people through his studies that truly only need 5 hours. And he says, rounded up to the nearest whole number, it's 0% of the population. He
Mm.
says, these are unicorns. These
Yeah.
people are genuinely unicorns that the medical data and them analyzing them says they operate on less sleep. So if you think you're a unicorn, I'm just telling you, you're probably not. You're a horse with a horn on the front of you. You're not actually a unicorn. Knock the horn off and get real with yourself. You probably need more sleep. And if you want to go to a doctor and have a doctor scan you and do all that stuff and say you're a unicorn, then only get 5 hours of sleep. That's great, but you're probably not. And then he gets into QQRT. Um, well, one of them has to do with the time. We're all on different time schedules. Some of us are early sleepers. So I am in bed every night at 8 o'clock. Now there's exceptions, right? There's times I got to pick up the kid from youth group and there's things that causes small shifts to that. But on the most part, I am very disciplined about that. Going to bed at the same time every night, waking up roughly the same time every single morning. Um, and then I'm forgetting the other one. If you remember,
R.
you can jump in.
I don't.
R. I think that has the is the well, I think one of them is the regularity, going to sleep at the same time, waking up at the same time, and then the T is we you have people that naturally go to bed at midnight.
Mhm.
And there are people that's their normal cycle. It's just who they are. And actually, during our teen years, so sometimes we get frustrated with our teenagers because in their teen years, they naturally will drift towards being a later to bed, later to rise. And that's normal. It's part of their bodies just growing up. And then typically as they get older, it will shift back to a little bit earlier to bed, earlier to rise. But there are some people that stay there. There are some people that just naturally are going to go to bed at midnight. You try to put them to bed at 8 and it's just not going to work. So those are the things that I've found is I have to stay consistent with my sleep routine, with my sleep hygiene. And if I do that, I do a pretty good job. And there's other little things like I don't get on my phone for roughly the last hour. I have big, thick history books next to my bed that I read before going to bed that makes my eyes really tired. I have a journal next to my bed that sometimes I practice either gratitude or write a few sentences from the day. So I've been kind of jumping around there, but bottom line is I've built a sleep hygiene routine and I stay consistent with it every night.
How have you noticed I'm sorry, I'm kind of taking over the question.
We're flipping the script here, folks. Ian Edwards is now hosting the Gravity Podcast. Let's go. Let's do this.
I am curious though. You mentioned a gratitude practice, and I've done gratitude practices as well. But can you? How's that working for you?
Yeah,
Especially when it comes to journaling.
yeah. The gratitude practice was big. I found out that it was big right around 2021, and we had some law changes in Washington State in reference to a bunch of things, from pursuits to being able to talk to juveniles to pretty much, even though it didn't decriminalize drugs in Washington State, it pretty much did. Drugs were still against the law technically, but you couldn't arrest people for it. You had to give them a bunch of warnings first. And it was just a big, huge, um, bad experiment. It was a horrible experiment. And the lawmakers finally figured it out. Bottom line was, when I was in the middle of that and really feeling discouraged, the only thing I changed was gratitude. So driving to work each day, I just decided I was going to start exercising gratitude. And it started with small things like the hot cup of coffee in my hand and a functional truck that was going to get me across town to work and a job where I got to earn money and provide medical benefits for my family. And I would sometimes verbalize those, sometimes think them. And Jaimie told me within a week or two, I started to stand up straight. She saw the change in my body, just the way I carried myself. So I typically will exercise gratitude verbally every morning. Every morning as I get up and I get my water down, the 16 ounces of water, and then I start drinking my first cup of coffee. As I'm sitting there reading the Bible and praying, usually at the very front end of all of that, there's some gratitude. Thank you for this couch. Thank you for this cat that just jumped into my lap. And I'm not really a cat person, but man, we got some good cats. And I'll verbalize it. Well, then I've decided to close out my day with some type of journaling. And so if I have something to say, sometimes I write a short poem. Sometimes I just write a few sentences. Then I'll write. If I have nothing to say, if I'm like, I don't got anything, usually I'll just start the header and I'll put gratitude and I'll list three things that I'm thankful for from the day. How about you?
Yeah, gratitude for me has just been one of those things. I used to do it at bedtime. I haven't over the last couple of years. I don't know why I stopped this, but we used to do before bed. I would ask my children what their gratitudes, and it was one of their favorite processes. I got to really have to be accountable to that because we've fallen off with that. But um, it was amazing to hear my children and what they would say that they were grateful for. And they would start, we could be walking to school and I could hear them say something to the effect of, "Ooh, that's going to be on my list tonight." So now they're scanning their environment for things just to be grateful for. And I thought, wow, what a cool process for them.
Yes. And this is what I've heard. And I don't know if I heard this on the Huberman Lab podcast or if I read it in a book, but I heard that our human brain cannot think about the negative and the positive at the same time. Now you may think you can, but really what you're doing is you're jumping back and forth between the two. You can only think about one of those two things at a time. So if you are exercising gratitude, you are functioning, you're operating in a different portion of your brain, and it's causing you to have a different perspective on life. So choose your perspective, because whatever your perspective is, you're probably going to get that affirmed today. So if your perspective is life sucks, I hate everyone, everyone is a bunch of a-holes, and well, then that's probably going to be your experience. But I'm sorry, there's enough people like Viktor Frankl, there's enough folks out there that have lived just absolutely oppressive lives, Nazi concentration camps, all kinds of horrible, horrible, horrible things. And they had a perspective that allowed them to survive. So, what kind of perspective do you want? What kind of life do you want to live? And I think we really have to be proactive with changing our perspective.
One way that I've heard this said is, and you've probably heard me use this analogy before, but you remember Super Size Me? The gentleman goes on the 30-day binge with
Yes.
McDonald's, and they're watching his physiology, and they're going, "You got to stop this. You're going to kill yourself." His doctor's like, "Your liver is shutting down. Your kidneys are going to fail. You got to stop doing this diet." And he said, "No, I've committed to 30 days." And what it was saying is what the poison you're putting into your body day after day is decaying your physical machine. Well, Howard Martin, one of the founders of the Heart Math Institute, asked this question I saw on a documentary I thought was really powerful. He said, "What is your emotional diet?
Mm,
What are the emotions that you're binging on
yes.
day after day after day? Are you binging on resentment and anger and frustration and anxiety and fear? Or are you doing what you said is generating gratitude, positivity, compassion? So what is your emotional diet? Has always stuck with me.
Yeah. And here's the thing, Ian, I'm not polishing turds. I'm not sitting there thinking, wow, I'm super happy that I get I don't know, pick up garbage today. Like when I do those jobs, I'm like, this sucks,
Mhm.
right? If I'm doing a job that I genuinely don't like, yeah, this sucks, but it's temporary. It's temporary. The suck is temporary. And there's always something on the other side of it, right? And right now I'm learning a lot as I train for sports again. There's just all kinds of constant analogies that are getting thrown my way as I experience the suck, as I experience the hardship. And it makes me think, how does this apply in my day to day life, the non sports world? And there are all kinds of crossover connections that I'm able to sit there and draw and just have a different perspective.
Yep.
So
Love
we've
it.
talked about sleep, we've talked about gratitude. Maybe let's talk about one more. What's one more maintenance thing that you do or that you've done that helps you keep from having that check engine light come on?
Find stillness.
Oh,
Well,
good.
just taking a moment to be you can look at the research around mindfulness. It's crystal clear now. There's all kinds of studies coming out where they've looked at how it rewires the brain. It can fix what is wrong with the brain, especially in those in the responder community who have repeated exposure to trauma. Mindfulness is one of the most beneficial things that you can do for yourself. Um, people usually use mindfulness and meditation simultaneously or interchangeably. And the way I think about it, and I'm a huge fan of meditation as well, but meditation for me is to slow down my physical experience so that I can pay attention to the thought stream that's under the surface.
Yeah.
Mindfulness for me is just the opposite. It's slowing down my thought stream so that I can pay attention to the present moment.
Well said. I like that.
So both incredibly beneficial, but just being in the present moment, there's so much research that says I am happier when I am present. Not thinking about the anxiety of the future, the regret of the past, but just being here fully in this moment.
You know what? And sometimes when people hear things like that, maybe they're not a person of faith, so the prayer thing's out the door. Then you start hearing about yoga. You're like, nah, I don't do that stuff either. I'm a man. Uh, and then you hear this mindfulness. Yeah, that sounds pretty mystic. I would again, you know what, Dr. Andrew Huberman, you need to really start paying me because I've mentioned you way too many times for a non-paid spot on this podcast. He really advocates for something called non-sleep deep rest, and it's actually yoga nidra. However, again, that is a stumbling block for some people hearing the word yoga. So it the terminology he's come up with, which is non-trademarked, and he says he's not doing it to try to get money. He's doing it to help people understand what it is. Non-sleep, deep rest. You lay down for 10 or 15 minutes. You set your alarm because you may fall asleep. And really the way I look at it is you do a body scan.
Yep.
You do a body scan. You start at the tip of your toes. And while you're focusing on your breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth, you just start going from toe to the top of your head, just checking in with the different parts of your body. How does it feel right now, listeners? If you're standing, how does it feel to have the bottom of your feet touching the ground or touching your shoe? What does that feel like? Before I asked the question, you weren't even aware of what it felt like because your attention wasn't drawn to it. And then you just continue that kind of scan all the way up your body. And I'm telling you, Ian, I've been using that one uh, where on days that I got little sleep or I'm just wore out and I'm 10 or 15 minutes and it just rejuvenates me. All of a sudden I'm like, I'm ready mentally and physically. I'm ready. Let's go for the second half of the day. What I know that you have a little bit more training than I do. What's kind of your go-to when it comes to some type of a mindfulness practice?
Well, I would say mindfulness really is just that paying attention on purpose in the present moment to the unfolding experience that you're having in your sensory experience, right? It can be around thought. What thoughts are coming into my head, noticing them, acknowledging them and allowing them to pass. Um, I find getting into stillness more of a meditative practice. And this can be, as you said, a lot of people of faith would look at meditation as something to stay away from. But I would say, even if it's a mantra on your faith, right? It could be on any word you choose. It could be on love, just repeating love over and over. And as other thoughts come in, no, I'm focused on love, right?
Yeah.
You're constantly bringing your attention back to a single point of focus. I work with a lot of Christian folks and ones who are often resistant to meditation. I just say, what is a word that we can use then? Is it Christ? Is it Jesus? Is it amen? Over and over again.
Yeah.
Uh, it can be any of those things, but the point is allowing your mind to slow that mental clutter down and constantly come back, because you'll notice you can hold your focus for about 4 seconds and it'll immediately start drifting. Then you say, oh, I'm supposed to be thinking about the word. So you come back, you focus on the word. Then maybe you go 7 seconds before your thoughts creep back in. And then eventually what you're finding is you slip into this space of stillness and calm that you just really hadn't accessed before. You allow those thoughts to come in. You don't judge them because your mind is doing exactly what it's supposed to do, which is think thoughts.
Yeah.
You allow those thoughts to come in, but then immediately remember and go back to that single point of focus.
Well, and I can't speak for all faiths, but I can tell you from the Christian faith, the Bible is clear. It talks about meditating on God's word. So it totally fits within the Christian faith. I think some people, like myself initially, are guarded because of the Eastern traditions of meditation. And it's not just within the Eastern traditions, it's within the Christian traditions as well, and very, very powerful. Brother, for folks that hadn't heard your voice before, didn't know who Ian was, what are ways that people can connect with you?
I would, so my website is currently under construction, but I would say get a hold of me at ian@chiselandstone.net, or I love a great network on LinkedIn. So find me on LinkedIn. Let's connect. For me, that's been a new joy of mine that I've just been starting to pick up more and more.
I love it. Well, for the listeners, I'm going to make that real easy. Both Ian's email address and his LinkedIn profile are going to be down in the show notes. Ian, time is my greatest commodity. I can't make more of this stuff, and you've given me an awful lot of yours, not just today, brother, but in the friendship that we share. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris.
Have a great day. Wow, folks, what did you think? It's not about the squeeze. It's not about the squeeze, folks. The juice that's coming out of you and the fruits of your behavior, right? It's not about the jerk that just cut you off in traffic. It's not about the kids not cleaning up their room. It's not about your spouse being a knucklehead and not recording a financial transaction. It's about what's inside of you. The stimulus that's happening outside of us is just revealing it to us. It's that check engine light. So if you have that stuff leaking out of you, big reactions, and afterwards you're scratching your head going, man, why do I act like that sometimes? Hey, let's get curious. Let's figure out what's going on inside. And let's start implementing some of these things that Ian talked about, from sleep to mindfulness We talked about one more, folks, and I'm currently forgetting it. Gratitude, exercising gratitude. Let's try some of that stuff. Let's do the maintenance so we don't have the major breakdowns. Hey, folks, Jaimie and I want to hear from you. How are we doing here on the podcast? There's a few different ways for you to communicate back to us. First and foremost, please follow us on whatever podcast platform you're listening on. That will cause the next episode to come up in your dashboard. We'd also appreciate you rating and reviewing us. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, there's 5 stars waiting on our main page. We'd really appreciate a 5-star rating if we've earned 5 stars, folks. If we haven't earned 5 stars, keep your stars. Instead, shoot me an email at chris@gravityct.com. Let us know how to make it better. Future Marriage Monday topics or guests for me to interview. Folks, we only get to live this life once. Let's go out and take care of the people in our tribes. Take care of each other. God bless.